Almost nobody can name the women who walked into the most dangerous territories in North America, alone, and changed thousands of lives forever. They carried no weapons. No government protection. No maps. Just a medical bag and an unshakable belief that they were needed. They were called foolish. They were called reckless. Some of them never came home. By the end of this video, you will know their names. And you will wonder why no one ever told you. America in the 1830s was a nation of two worlds. The eastern cities were booming, factories, newspapers, gas lamps, and cobblestone streets. But just a few hundred miles west, there was nothing. No roads. No hospitals. No schools. No law. In 1830, the United States government passed the Indian Removal Act, one of the most consequential and devastating laws in American history. Tens of thousands of Native Americans were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands. Families walked through freezing rain with no shoes. Children died on roadsides. Entire nations were erased from the map. The suffering was immense. And largely invisible to the comfortable citizens of the eastern states who would never see it firsthand. Into this chaos, not soldiers, not politicians, but women stepped forward. Most of them young. Most of them unmarried. Most from small New England towns. They packed their trunks, said goodbye to their families, sometimes forever, and headed west into a wilderness that had no place for them yet. What drove them was not recklessness. It was something quieter and far more powerful, the unshakable conviction that where there is suffering, someone must go. Her name was Narcissa Prentice. She grew up in Prattsburg, New York, devout, well-read, and quietly determined to do something that mattered. By every measure of her time, she had a good life waiting for her in New York. A respectable marriage. A safe home. A predictable future. In 1836, Narcissa did something no white American woman had ever done. She crossed the Rocky Mountains. She was 28 years old. She was pregnant. The journey covered over 2,000 miles through terrain that experienced mountain men described as nearly impassable. There were no roads. No bridges. No shelter most nights. When the party finally crested the Blue Mountains and looked down into the Columbia River Valley below, Narcissa reportedly wept. Not from exhaustion. From joy. She and her husband Marcus established a mission at Waylatpoo in present-day Washington state, among the Cayuse people. And Narcissa got to work immediately. She didn't just preach. She ran a school. She treated the sick. She became, in the most practical sense, the center of an entire frontier community. When a wagon accident on the Oregon Trail orphaned 11 children, Narcissa took every single one of them in. She raised them alongside her own work at the mission. Devastated the Cayuse tribe, a disease brought west by emigrants, grief turned to fury. Narcissa Whitman was killed in what became known as the Whitman Massacre. She was 39 years old. But her letters survived. Published after her death, they inspired a generation of American women to follow her west. She had opened a door she never lived to walk back through. Narcissa Whitman got the headlines. But Eliza Spalding, who made that same 1836 crossing, may have accomplished even more, and almost no one knows her name. Eliza was in genuinely poor health when she left. Her own doctor warned her the journey could kill her. She thanked him and packed her bags anyway. She crossed the same mountains. Endured the same conditions. And arrived in the Pacific Northwest ready to work. While Narcissa settled among the Cayuse, Eliza and her husband Henry went to the Nez Perce people of present-day Idaho. And Eliza did something remarkable, she learned their language. Completely. Fluently. She then created a written alphabet for the Nez Perce language, something that had never existed before, and used it to translate hymns, stories, and educational materials. She painted illustrated teaching charts by hand because she understood instinctively that images communicate across language barriers in ways that words alone cannot. She was in every sense a visual educator. She opened the first school specifically for Native American girls in the entire Pacific Northwest. For many of those students it was their first access to formal education of any kind. She delivered her own children with no doctor present, sometimes with no other women nearby, and returned to work within days. Because the work would not wait. When Eliza died in 1851, she was buried in Idaho, far from the New York town where she was born. The Nez Perce people attended her funeral. Many of them wept. Her language work survived her. Linguists and native language preservationists still reference Eliza Spalding's materials today. She built something that outlasted everything, including herself. After Narcissa and Eliza came dozens more. Then hundreds. The mission movement of the mid-1800s sent American women into the most forgotten corners of a growing nation. Cynthia Brown traveled alone to rural Tennessee in 1847 to open a school in a one-room cabin with no floor, no windows, and 40 students ranging from age 5 to 22. She taught in that same community for 31 years. When she died, the town named the road after her. That was her monument. Mary Riggs spent decades learning the Dakota Sioux language and translating educational materials into it, painstaking work that would protect the language from disappearing entirely. Her translations gave Dakota-speaking communities access to written materials in their own language at a time when everything around them was pushing them toward erasure. Amanda Garroway, a freed black woman from Philadelphia, traveled to Kansas in 1862, in the middle of the Civil War, to do something extraordinary. She opened a school for formerly enslaved people who were arriving in Kansas by the thousands, hungry, barefoot, and free for the first time in their lives. They needed everything. She gave what she had. Others went even further. American women missionaries reached Hawaii, working alongside native Hawaiian communities through a period of enormous political and cultural change. Some stayed in the cities. In the slums of New York and Boston, mission women ran feeding programs, health clinics, and schools for the waves of immigrants flooding American shores. These women didn't make the newspapers. They didn't get statues in the town square. But the communities they served remembered them. And that memory is its own kind of monument. It would be wrong to paint these women as perfect saints. The history is complicated. And honesty demands we hold the full picture. Some of these women carried the assumptions of their era, the belief that their culture was superior, that they were bringing civilization to people who hadn't asked for it. Some of the communities they entered resented their presence. Some felt their traditions being quietly eroded. The relationship was never simple, and we shouldn't pretend it was. Historians today are doing the important work of holding both truths at once, that these women showed genuine courage and compassion, and that the broader mission movement caused real harm. What we can say is this: many of these women formed genuine bonds across cultural lines. They learned languages. They ate the food. They stayed when conditions became dangerous. That matters. History doesn't give us clean heroes. It gives us people, complicated, flawed, often well-meaning, operating in impossible circumstances with imperfect tools. What sets these women apart is not that they were perfect. It's that they went. When the world told them to stay home, they looked at the suffering around them and decided that couldn't be their answer. That choice, to go anyway, knowing the risks, knowing the imperfections, is worth remembering. And worth examining honestly. One of the most extraordinary things about these women is that they wrote everything down. At a time when most women's voices were never preserved, these missionaries kept meticulous journals and letters. Thousands of those documents survive today in archives across the country. In Oregon. In Idaho. In Philadelphia. In Boston. They have been waiting quietly for someone to read them. Reading them is like stepping through a doorway into another world. These aren't dry historical records. They are alive. Narcissa wrote to her mother, "I wish I could describe to you how the mountains look in the early morning, when the light first touches the snow. I thought I had seen beautiful things. I had not." Eliza Spalding wrote more simply, "I am tired to the bone. But there is more to do tomorrow." 5 words that carry the weight of an entire life of purpose. These letters are now being digitized. The Oregon Historical Society, the Presbyterian Historical Society, and the Smithsonian all hold collections you can access from home. Tonight, if you wanted to. When you read them, something remarkable happens. Voices that have been silent for 170 years suddenly speak directly to you across time. And you realize how little human longing has changed. These archives are part of your history. American history. And they are more accessible now than they have ever been. The women who wrote those letters deserve to be read. You might be wondering why any of this matters today. Here is why. We are living in a moment when the true role of women in building America is being actively rediscovered. Historians who spent decades writing about presidents and generals are now turning their attention to teachers, nurses, missionaries, and community builders, the people who didn't make the front page but made the country. These women didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for the world to make room. They identified a need, gathered their courage, and walked into the unknown. In doing so, they educated thousands of children who would otherwise have had no school. They preserved languages that might otherwise have been lost. They built communities from nothing. Most of them lived in poverty their entire careers. Most are buried in places far from where they were born. They did not do it for fame or money. They did it because they believed it was right. This is a story that belongs in American living rooms. Around American dinner tables. Passed from grandparents to grandchildren. Because it is true. And because it is yours. The frontier these women walked into is gone. But the spirit that drove them, the refusal to look away from suffering, the determination to do something that matters, that is not gone. That is very much alive. The next time someone says women didn't help build this country, think of Narcissa Whitman, 28 years old, pregnant, crossing the Rocky Mountains on horseback. First woman ever to do it. Think of Eliza Spalding, creating a written language for a people so their words could survive, and survive they did, in archives that exist to this day. Think of Amanda Garroway, walking into Kansas in the middle of a war to open a school for people tasting freedom for the very first time. They were here. They did the work. And now, you know their names. If this video moved you, share it with someone who loves American history. And if there is a woman in your life who showed that same quiet, stubborn courage, maybe today is a good day to tell her. Thank you for watching.